They thought they destroyed me when they fired me in front of everyone. They laughed, mocked, and moved on. But what I did next, just a few months later, shocked the entire industry and made them wish they had never crossed me. My name is Ryan Blake, and a year ago, I was working as a junior project analyst at a high-end tech consulting firm in Chicago. I wasn't anyone special, not in their eyes at least. I kept my head down, did my job well, and stayed away from the drama. But corporate offices are snake pits, and in this one, the biggest snake was a man named Greg Dawson, my direct manager. He was arrogant, always stealing credit, and made it his mission to keep people like me small. I once worked for 2 months straight on a major client strategy proposal, a pitch that could have landed us a $1 million deal. Greg pretended to support me, asked me to share my slides, and even told me I'd be the one to present it. But on the day of the pitch, he showed up early, walked into the boardroom without me, presented my entire strategy as his own, and took all the credit. No mention of me. Nothing. I was shocked and stupid. I confronted him that afternoon in front of a few colleagues, thinking justice would stand by my side. Instead, he flipped the story, told HR I had violated professional boundaries, and within 48 hours, I was fired. Just like that. No warning, no severance, no mercy. People at work snickered when I packed my things. They made jokes, whispered behind my back, and some even clapped when I left the building. I was humiliated. I had $300 in my bank account, rent due in 2 weeks, and no job. But that night, as I sat alone in my tiny apartment, something inside me clicked. I realized I had been giving everything to a system that saw me as disposable. I wasn't going to beg for jobs anymore. I was going to build something of my own. The idea hit me like lightning. What if I created a lean tech consulting startup that specialized in exactly the kind of cost-cutting strategies I pitched to Greg's firm? I already knew their weaknesses. I knew what clients wanted. I even knew what the big firms were too slow to adapt to. Over the next 6 months, I worked like a madman. I slept 5 hours a night, coded my own software, reached out to ex-clients I had worked with, and got my first deal in month 3. By month 6, I had hired a small team of ex-corporate misfits, just like me, and we were profitable. But I didn't stop there. I kept growing, kept building relationships, and then something amazing happened. One of Greg's biggest clients, Paragon Systems, left his firm and came to mine. They said they were tired of empty suits and wanted a fresh, efficient team. That deal alone doubled our revenue. And with that came more attention. Suddenly, people who used to ignore me were sending LinkedIn messages. The same colleagues who laughed when I was fired were now so proud of me. And then came the moment that changed everything. I got an email from a private equity firm. They were looking to buy out a struggling tech consultancy. And guess whose firm was on the list? Greg's. Turns out he had burned too many bridges, lost too many clients, and the board was looking to sell. I told the PE firm I was interested. I used my recent success and client list as leverage, and after weeks of negotiation, I bought the company that once kicked me to the curb. I didn't just buy it. I took over completely. And guess who was still working there? Every single person who had laughed at me that day. Greg was still there too, but no longer a boss. He was under review. The first thing I did as owner? I called a full team meeting, walked into the same boardroom where I was once embarrassed. And when they saw me walk in, their jaws dropped. Some tried to smile. Some looked down. Greg looked like he had seen a ghost. I stood there, paused, and said, "Surprise. I'm your new boss." The room went dead silent. I wasn't done yet. You could have heard a pin drop in that boardroom. Faces turned pale. Mouths hung open. No one said a word. Greg, who always carried that smug, untouchable attitude, suddenly looked like a man whose entire world had just collapsed. I stood there for a few long seconds, soaking it all in, before I said, "Relax. I'm not here to fire anyone. Yet." A few fake chuckles slipped through the silence, but they quickly died when I added, "But I am here to clean house." I walked around the table, making eye contact with every single person who had laughed at me, dismissed me, or turned their back on me when I needed support. I reminded them, one by one, of what they did, how they joined in when I was humiliated, how they stayed quiet when Greg stole my work, and how they clapped when I left the building unemployed. And now, they were looking at me like I was their executioner. I didn't fire anyone on day one. No, I wanted them to sweat. I called for performance audits, full team reviews, and mandatory one-on-ones. I brought in my own management team, people who actually earned their positions. I slashed unnecessary overhead, changed policies, and demanded accountability. Overnight, the culture shifted from arrogance to fear. Greg? I moved into a tiny office, no window, no assistant, and had him work under a guy he once called just a glorified intern. He tried to fight back, said he wouldn't take orders from me. I calmly told him, then don't. You're free to leave right after you repay the $250,000 in client losses you caused this quarter. That shut him up. Over the next few weeks, I watched as the ones who used to mock me now stayed late, scrambled to please me, and sent carefully worded emails begging for second chances. One day, I walked past the break room and overheard two of them whispering, "He's not the same guy. He's a beast now." They were right. I wasn't the same. Being betrayed, humiliated, and tossed out had forged a version of me that no longer needed approval, validation, or fear. But I wasn't done just punishing individuals. I was going to take everything, the building, the brand, the reputation, and rebuild it in my image. And the next step? Turning Greg's downfall into a public lesson. I scheduled a company-wide town hall. Cameras, press invites, everything. Greg tried to avoid it, but I told him attendance was mandatory. That morning, I stepped onto the stage in front of every employee, old and new, and said, "Some of you know who I am. Some of you may not. But let me make one thing clear. I was once fired from this company for standing up for myself. And now, I own it. Not because I was lucky, but because I turned betrayal into fire and humiliation into fuel." I paused, looked right at Greg, and continued. The same people who laughed at me are now reporting to me. In this company, it's no longer a playground for politics. From now on, we reward integrity and punish corruption. The audience erupted. The media picked up the story. Overnight, headlines read, "Fired analyst returns as CEO, cleans house." Emails from former clients started flooding in. People who had left during Greg's reign were now asking to return under my leadership. Within 3 months, revenue had tripled. The toxic team members who couldn't adapt? Gone. The ones who learned their lesson and improved? Promoted. Greg? He handed in his resignation with a weak smile and a 2-line email. I didn't even reply. I had my assistant send him a box of tissues with a note from the guy who wasn't good enough. That day, I sat in the corner office, once Greg's kingdom, leaned back in the leather chair, and smiled. I had taken everything they said I'd never earn and made it mine. But this story isn't over yet, because what I did next shook the entire industry. With Greg out of the picture and the company firmly in my control, I knew it was time to go even bigger. I didn't just want to rebuild what they had broken. I wanted to dominate the entire sector. So, I launched an aggressive expansion plan. I opened 2 new satellite offices, one in San Francisco, one in Austin, and personally recruited top talent from rival firms. But I didn't stop there. I began exposing the shady corporate practices I had once witnessed while working under Greg and his cronies, anonymous tip-offs to regulatory boards, leaked internal emails to investigative journalists, and documented cases of client fraud that had been swept under the rug for years. Suddenly, the industry was shaken. CEOs were being questioned. Stocks dropped. Investigations were launched. Meanwhile, my company? It was booming. Transparent, efficient, clean. We became the go-to firm for clients who were tired of being manipulated. And then, something unexpected happened. One of the biggest firms in the industry, an empire that once turned me down for an entry-level position, reached out to propose a merger. Their offer? $48 million. I smiled, closed the laptop, and didn't even respond. I didn't want to merge. I wanted to surpass them. So I did something no one expected. I bought out their 3 top clients one by one, offering better service, lower costs, and real results. Within 6 months, their quarterly reports showed a 35% drop in revenue, and industry analysts were whispering that my firm was the new leader. I became a featured speaker at tech conferences. Business magazines started calling me the comeback king. I didn't do interviews. I didn't brag. I just kept winning. And the best part? I started a mentorship program for people just like me, talented, overlooked, and discarded by toxic bosses. I gave them tools, funding, and belief. I built an army of underdogs, and we started changing the game across the country. As for the people who laughed when I was fired, some of them now work in junior roles at companies I own. Some still send me emails, begging for second chances. And Greg? Last I heard, he's managing a small office supplies store in Indiana, telling anyone who will listen that he almost made it big. But we both know the truth. He had his chance and blew it. I didn't just get revenge. I built a legacy on the ashes of their doubt. So the next time someone underestimates you, mocks your ambition, or tosses you aside like you don't matter, remember this story. Success isn't about proving them wrong. It's about becoming so powerful that their opinions no longer matter. And when they finally see what you've built, they won't be laughing. They'll be begging for a seat at your table.